Hi guys, and welcome to the No Gluten Zone. If you haven't been here before, I make content for people with food issues, whether that's allergies, sensitivities, intolerances, or autoimmune issues that affect your diet. I've had a lot of requests to share recipes, so I thought I would start a new series of sharing some favorite recipes. And one thing that I love, especially like once summer's over and the heat's over, I get more into baking. I do bake year round, but it's like more this time of year, especially with my sourdough starter. And so today is a sourdough starter recipe. And I am also going to make a video showing you how to start your own sourdough starter. But all of that to say, I'm going to be making a sourdough naan bread, Naan. It's like an Indian flatbread, and it's really good and really easy to make. So we're going to start by combining everything, and super easy. Everything in this mixer bowl, I'm going to mix it on the mixer, and then we have some options that we'll talk about at that point. We're going to start with 1 cup of sourdough starter. To that, we're going to add 1/2 cup of brown rice flour. Then we're going to add 1/4 cup of arrowroot starch. And then 1/4 cup of potato starch. Just a personal preference. I like to find recipes that have at least an equal amount of whole grain to starch, but even preferably more whole grain than starch. But we already see we have more whole grain here because our sourdough starter is whole grain. And then that brown rice flour is a whole grain, and that's 1.5 cup of whole grain versus 1/2 cup of starches, the 1/4 cup of arrowroot and the 1/4 cup of potato starch. It's just healthier, better glycemic index, better for your blood sugar, and just all around. It's just something that I look at, and I find that I feel better when I eat things with less starch. I don't say no starch, but if I can minimize starch and have at least more whole grain than starch, I find that I feel better. Sharing that for what it's worth. Then we're going to put 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I always use extra virgin olive oil. There's a lot of, I know there's bad stuff everywhere, but there is a lot of fraudulent olive oil on the market. So one thing I do to try to prevent that is I always buy the California olive oils, and I look for the seal. This seal right here means it was tested and is supposed to be pure olive oil. That is the best thing I have found for trying to make sure that I don't have a fraudulent olive oil. Then 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and finally 1/4 cup of water or milk. I'm going to use water. Most of the time I use water. For years, my husband could not have dairy, and most of my recipes I made, if it called for milk, I would just substitute water in most cases. Like if you're making like an Alfredo sauce or something like that, obviously that's not going to work. But especially in baking stuff, and people would always ask me like, what do you do with the milk? And I was like, you can put a non-dairy milk option and that kind of thing, but a lot of times those they have a different flavor and they leave like an aftertaste. So I would just put water, and people couldn't believe it because it would turn out really good with just water. So I'm still kind of in the habit, like occasionally I'll use milk now because my husband can have dairy now, but most of the time I just still opt for water. Okay, I'm going to mix this up on my mixer, and then we're going to talk about those options. Okay, so I've combined this all together. It's nice and well mixed. I have 3 options now to proceed with this recipe. This is one of the reasons I really like this recipe. It will really fit your schedule no matter what's going on that day. Option number 1 is to cover this, let it rest like 20 to 30 minutes, and then proceed with the recipe. Option number 2 is cover this and let it rest anywhere from 2 to 6 hours and then proceed with the recipe. And option number 3, you can cover it, put it in the refrigerator like overnight or for longer than 6 hours, and then take it out and proceed with this recipe. So I'm going to do the 2 to 6 hour option today. So I'm going to cover this, let it sit, and we'll come back to this later. Hello and welcome back. So the dough has been sitting covered for several hours. What we're going to do is split this into 4 pieces on parchment paper. They don't need to be any kind of perfect shape. Just spread them out. Okay, so for cooking these, you can do them in a cast iron pan, on a cast iron griddle, or you can do them in the oven on a baking stone or baking steel. I have a baking steel in my oven and I'm going to use that. And I'm going to use my pizza peel to get it in there and take it out. And you're going to cook it for 5 minutes on the parchment, and then you remove the parchment and cook it for another 5 minutes. If you're using the baking steel in the oven, you want your oven preheated to 450 degrees. We've got 3 done and 1 to go. And they're done. This is where I wish I could capture the smell in here right now because it's amazing. These are nice and flexible. They're not hard. You can do so much with these. You could just eat them as they are alongside your meal. You could dip them in a dip. You could turn them into mini pizzas or like a garlic bread. I like to also, like as an appetizer, you could cut them into strips, either long ways or this way, and then have them like in a little cup where they pull out the strips and then there's dips for them. There's just so many possibilities, and they're so easy to make and they're so yummy. I really hope you'll give this a try. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless you.